If I am having a heart attack, if I drop on the floor, what kind of trauma are we doing on our daughter? I don't know what's wrong with my dad, and I don't know where my mom is, and I don't know how to get a hold of my mom. Heart issues don't run in your family. Specific mindsets and thought processes run in your family that get passed on physiologically. If you're a leader, you don't have to force leadership. You just need to work on your heart posture. What's up, family? Welcome back to the podcast. This is a Profitable Chiro Network. I am your host, Dr. Daniel, and my beautiful wife, Heather, is here with us again. And I'm super excited for what's going to come today because we are going to talk about something that has to do with neurology, but in a way that I haven't really ever seen anybody talk about except for a few people who are like outliers.
Yeah.
And what we're going to talk about is the heart. And so this whole conversation of the heart and heart space, I actually heard somebody on a podcast say that heart posture isn't a real thing. And I want to crush that today.
Okay.
And I want to talk about what it even means to have a heart posture, why the heart is important to what happens neurologically. And we're also going to get into what I would argue is that if you don't understand the heart, then you literally cannot get to the next level and whatever in your life that you're looking for. Okay. So, and I think a lot of people would say getting to the next level is a financial goal or a goal with your family or having a certain car, a certain house or whatever it is. Sure. But realistically, next level comes from your spiritual connection to God because you know that we operate in this place where He provides everything.
Yes.
So what I think is interesting is that like what we focus on for most of the podcast so far has been about the brain specifically, but there's a very intricate tie between the brain and what happens between the brain and the heart.
Okay.
And I read this book a long time ago. It's a book called The Heart's Code. The guy's last name is Pearsall. And they make some really interesting arguments. So one of the things that he talks about with the heart is that when they do heart transplants with people, they could see someone's personality change.
What?
Yeah.
How's that the case?
Well, that's kind of the question. So as I'm doing the research on it, there's no definitive science that says, yes, this is possible.
Sure.
But with hopefully what I'll share in the interconnection between the heart and the brain today, we'll get into this idea of how that could potentially be plausible and what this guy's a doctor, by the way. So like what they saw with these heart transplants and why that's the case. And the argument that I'm going to make is that heart posture is a real thing. I'll talk about it from a biblical perspective. We'll talk about it from a neurological perspective and how our brain controls our heart and actually how our heart controls our brain. And we'll talk about heart posture and then some of the things that some people could do to potentially get their heart space in a better place. So their heart posture in a better place.
Okay.
And, like I was thinking of Dej when we talk about the heart because she's like, I want you guys to hear my heart. And the more I've thought about this and like doing this episode, I wanted to do it because there's reality in it and it's rooted in science and it's rooted in the brain and there's a specific neurology involved and we're going to talk about all of it and the science that is out there about the heart. And it's freaking fascinating.
I'm excited.
So fascinating. So first thing we have to do is we have to realize that the heart, have you ever heard somebody say like, hey, the gut is the second brain?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So
the gut is like so big right now.
The gut is so big right now, but what's not so big right now is the heart. And I would argue that the heart is actually the second brain.
Why?
Great question. Can I leave it on a cliffhanger? And there's a very specific reason. Okay. But the way that the heart communicates with the brain, arguably that's actually the second brain.
Well, a lot of people think that the heart is like the most important organ. Like, didn't they have a TV show where they asked somebody, like the taxi cab driver was asking people what the most important organ in the body was, and pretty much every single person said the heart. Yeah,
I think sometimes when we ask kids or people who don't have like a really, really deep knowledge of the body, a lot of people would say heart because heart pumps blood, but the heart does a bunch of other stuff too.
Okay.
And really, like, I guess I should probably share a little bit of context for why I want to talk about the heart. Earlier, I think this was 2 weeks ago, someone in the office, they were talking about how heart issues run in their family. And I made the argument to them that no, actually heart issues don't run in your family, that specific mindsets and thought processes run in your family that get passed on physiologically. And so your heart issue is nothing more than just a symptom of, we could say generational stronghold. We could say mental stronghold. We could say bent character traits. We could say a bunch of different things. But the thought is that any issue that, like, people say all the time, like, well, back pain runs in my family or cancer runs in my family. While that could potentially be true, there's genetics and epigenetics.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that.
Yeah, ask away.
No, I was just going to say, like, what you just said about like generational strongholds that contribute to heart issues running in the family completely, if you will, debunks the idea of epigenetics and genetics being passed down for generations.
Yep, exactly. And so heart has a very specific, let's say, emotional encoding.
Okay.
And it can have to do with joy. It can have to do with expression of life, and balancing life. So the heart, I would argue, represents the emotion of balance. So if someone feels very out of balance, and I'll explain why. There's two words that get into this. There's coherence and homeostasis. We'll talk about those later. Those are the sciencey terms for this. Mm-hmm. But if the heart gets out of balance, somebody's likely experiencing a lack of joy and a lack of just balance and ease and peace and flow in their life.
Can you give us like a real world example of what that person would look like?
For sure. So let's say a mom comes to sit down with us. So let's say that her kids are a little bit older, they're grown, mm-hmm. and heart issues run in my family. So I have to be very careful because cardiac issues, dad's had heart attack, mom's had heart attacks, mm-hmm. my brother, my sister, my uncle on my mom's side of the family all have heart issues. So when I hear those kind of things, and again, there's a specific science to this, and I won't get into the emotional piece of it on this episode, but the science is that if we carry those emotions, remember that emotions, we talked about this on other episodes of the podcast, are going to trigger physiology. Mm-hmm. And if emotions trigger physiology, then the first two things that stress hormones do is increase heart rate, increase blood pressure. Keyword heart rate.
Right.
So if that's the first thing that stress hormones do, it's pretty likely that if we have stress, emotional turmoil, we're experiencing a lack of joy, then that's going to affect our heart. And so those emotions get carried in the heart, but they can also get passed down because the next generation, if I have a lack of joy and that's an emotion that my body's trying to keep me safe from and keep me protected from, we're going to pass that on so the future generation can stay safe and protected. So the mom who has multiple kids, super stressed out by life, doesn't feel necessarily, maybe like husband has a huge business and there's not a lot of literal balance between what mom has to do and roles. Then like her relationship with her husband. Yep, exactly. Roles. Mm-hmm. When those things get out of balance and life feels very difficult, these are often the people who are like, I just can't make time in my schedule to come do this thing. I just can't make time in my schedule to work out. I just can't make time in my schedule to go to yoga or get adjusted or whatever it is. Mm-hmm. Oftentimes there's a lack of balance. Mm-hmm. And of course it would show up as heart issues because like one, they're literally not taking care of themselves.
Right.
Like they're not making space and time for themselves, which leads to chaos within their system. Mm-hmm. And we'll talk about chaos a little bit later.
Okay.
Does that make sense so far?
I think so.
Yeah. All right. So why does all this matter? So it matters because we have to talk about the Bible in order to do this. So there's some scripture. There were more than this, but these are the ones that came up. One including came up this morning. So 1 Samuel 16, verse 7, man looks on the outward appearance, but the Lord looks on the heart. So if we think about what are we chasing in our lives, and remember my argument that I said at the beginning, if you're looking for next level, if we're chasing watches and bank account numbers and like how many people we take care of in our office or how big our business is or relationships, like there's a number of places, 6-packs, how big our muscles are. I'm not saying those are bad things to chase or it's wrong.
Sure.
But God doesn't care. Like it's very clear from scripture mm-hmm. in 1 Samuel that man looks on the outward appearance, but God looks at the heart. Mm. So that's one scripture. Psalm 51:10 says, create in me a clean heart. So this is David mm-hmm. speaking to God, saying, create in me a clean heart, create in me a clean heart. And David had his own set of issues that we don't have to get into. But the same thing, he doesn't say create in me a new brain. Mm-hmm. He says create in me a new heart. And we talked about renewing of the mind in the last episode of the podcast. So like there's a balance, right? There's a balance between what's happening in the mind and what's happening in the heart. And what I want to get to in here in just a second is how the mind influences the heart and how the heart, more importantly, influences the mind.
Okay.
Are we doing good so far?
Yeah.
Okay. So 2 more. Proverbs 4:23 says, above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it.
Mm.
And again, I'll get into the science of it. But if we say everything you do flows from it, your decision making doesn't actually flow from your brain. It flows from your heart.
That sounds almost counterintuitive
to everything I've said so far.
Yes.
So there's a space. Again, the heart is the second brain because the brain tells the heart to beat. I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit. The brain tells the heart to beat. So we have to have the brain.
Right.
If we don't have the brain, then we literally don't have a heartbeat. The heart can't beat on its own. But the heart has a mind and a neurology of its own. I'll talk about some of the research involved in just a second. And then lastly, I literally just saw this morning. So Jeremiah 4, verses 3 and 4. This one's like a little bit more weird, but in Jeremiah, it says, literally circumcise the foreskins of your hearts. So take away the flesh, the coating on the outside of your heart, and soften your heart.
Okay.
Right? So I know that uses a little bit more harsh language and terminology, but I think it's important to understand, again, like the whole point of all of this is that if you're looking to go to the next level, yes, addressing your brain is key, but you also have to address your heart.
Mm.
What are you thinking?
Yeah, you can't do one without the other.
They're intricately connected.
Yes.
So let me just share a little story. You know this story because so Heather just had a birthday on March 23rd.
Yes.
And we're now in April. So if we go back a year ago, so this would have been March 23rd, 2024.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to tell the story?
No, please.
Okay. So March 23rd, 2024, I surprised Heather with a night away at the Montage. She was going to get a massage the next day. She was going to have just a night away to be on her own. No Coco, no me, no responsibilities, just chilling.
No responsibilities is key right there.
And I should probably set a little bit of the backdrop is that day before we were hustling real hard. You had a photo shoot with Cameron.
Yes, that's right.
I had Coco, but it was also a season where I was just kind of like, let's buy Coco whatever she wants. So we went to the mall and we went to the Lego store while you were doing your photo shoot.
I forgot about that.
And I bought Coco a ton of Legos.
Yeah.
And I bought her a ton of clothes from Cotton On Kids. And we were just like shopping. And then we didn't know what time you were going to be done. So I was expecting you to be done way later. And we go and get lunch. And it was like such a fun day. And then I get a call from you and you're like, hey, I'm done. And Coco and I had just ordered food and sat down to eat. And then I'm stressing out because I wanted it to be your time and your birthday, and I wanted it to be special and you not have to wait around on us because you were doing the photo shoot for your birthday.
Yeah, and all this is in context of like we only had one car at the time, so that's why you were like waiting on me.
True, and I wasn't necessarily, like I could have went home,
right,
but Coco and I just decided that we were going to do like a fun little date day while you were doing your thing.
Yeah, but that's why I had to like call you to come pick me up. We only had one car.
Yeah, and I guess the photo shoot was also part of your birthday. So anyway, like Coco and I sit down, we're just about to eat, and then you call and you said, hey, I'm done. And I wasn't about to have you wait on us for 30 or 40 minutes. Coco takes forever to eat. I love her so much. But
oh, yes. She doesn't like to be rushed. She likes
does not.
to enjoy her food.
I will sit and eat for 2 hours if you will let me, kind of girl.
Yes.
So I share all that because it was a stressful day for me. But everything else had seemed normal. Like the weather was beautiful. I went surfing that morning, I'm pretty sure. And Coco and I were just chilling. So we drop you off at the Montage. Coco and I go home. We do our regular thing. We eat dinner. I don't even remember what we ate for dinner that night. I go to bed, and at like probably 11:30, I wake up and I have chest pain. And felt like heartburn, but I wasn't sure. And so I
never had heartburn.
Never really had heartburn like that before. So then I'm like, all right, well, maybe it's indigestion. But then it's like my back is hurting on my left side, and then my left arm starts hurting, and then up into my left side of my neck starts hurting. And at that point, this is like an hour later, I kind of start freaking out a little bit.
Right.
And I'm thinking in my head, like, dude, am I having a heart attack right now? What is happening? And all the while, I feel like there's just pressure on my chest.
Yeah.
So I get up, I go get water, I lay back down, it gets worse. I get up, I start to feel a little bit better, I lay back down, it gets worse. So I'm doing this until like 2 a.m. And I start having the thought, this is where it gets crazy, because I start having the thought of, all right, Heather's away, she's at the Montage. I don't want to pull her from her birthday party or her birthday celebration, her relaxation.
Yes.
Especially because most people don't know this, but you love to sleep in.
Oh, yes.
And wake up slow. So the opposite of what would be a perfect birthday for you would be
waking up to you.
awakened at 2 a.m. saying, hey, I think I need you to come home.
Right.
So my fear, like legitimately my fear, I start thinking about worst case scenario. And I'm like, dude, if I am having a heart attack, then if I drop on the floor and Coco wakes up in the morning, she has no way to get a hold of you. You have no way to get a hold of me. What kind of trauma are we doing on our daughter? Or am I putting on my daughter for her to wake up in the morning and feel this sense of like, oh my gosh, I don't know what's wrong with my dad, and I don't know where my mom is, and I don't know how to get a hold of my mom.
Yeah.
And then I start going even worse, and I'm like, what's Heather going to do when I'm supposed to be there at noon to pick her up, and then I would just don't show up. So there's all this stuff running through my head, and I start getting
fear in worst case scenarios.
Super fearful.
Yeah.
So the only thing I can think to do is call you, and which I'm just praying that you're awake in the middle of the night, or that you would wake up and look at your phone, and I'm like, hey, you got to come home just in case, because that's the last thing I want is Coco to find her dad laid out on the floor. And I couldn't lay down. So I realized that I was just smart enough to understand, like, okay, I trust my body. I know what a heart attack is. I learned some of this stuff in chiropractic school. And it's positional. So if it's positional, that's not a heart attack.
The pain you were experiencing was positional.
Yep. So what I mean by positional, if I sat up, it still hurt, but it was exponentially better. As soon as I would lay down, it was super painful.
Yeah.
If I would bend forward, it's super painful. If I laid on my stomach, super painful. But if I was sitting up, I was like, okay-ish.
Less pressure.
Until I would move.
Right.
So you come home and you're like, dude, what is happening?
Well, you texted me.
Yep.
You called and texted, and I just happened to wake up in the middle of the night and check my phone. And I see your text message, so I call you. And then you literally asked if I could come home, essentially.
Yeah.
At 2:00 in the morning.
Yep. 100%.
Yep.
So you come home, you're freaking out. You're like, do you need to get adjusted? What is going on right now?
Right.
Are you going to die? So wake up first thing in the morning. And
no, I'm not sure that we went to sleep, by the way.
No, we went to sleep. Because I just sleep sitting up. You didn't go to sleep.
Nope.
But Coco was in our bed, so that made a whole other thing because Coco and I were sleeping together. But I had to sleep on the couch sitting up. And wake up the next morning, go to urgent care, find out nothing's wrong.
Right.
As far as the doctor could tell, he's like, dude, you work out, you're healthy, you were surfing yesterday. I don't think you had a heart attack. We can do these other tests if you want to. But he's like, honestly, he's like, I really don't think you need to.
It was really cool to experience care with him, by the way, because he was extremely conservative and very honoring of you trusting your body as well, and him also trusting the fact that you knew what your body was able to do.
Yeah.
So it's difficult sometimes to experience that type of service and care from a medical doctor, I would say. So it was really cool to see that he was like, you don't need this. You don't need this. You don't need this. And he was just like, just rest.
Yep.
Essentially, which was like completely opposite of what I think some people have experienced in the past.
Yeah, exactly. So we had a great experience with the doctor. He's like, and he was like, if you want to, you can take these acid reflux meds or
like anti-inflammatories.
And then you'll just have to see what happens. So I ended up having to take off like 2 days from the office because I just couldn't be active at all. And there was like another 2 weeks where I still had these issues. I still have no idea what it was. Like they all said I was fine, but I was okay. But reflecting on the moment and the time in history,
the connection to what was happening,
the connection to that joy and this sense of like flow and ease,
balance,
I just don't, there like wasn't a lot of it. And there were like interesting relationships with mentors and me just kind of trying to figure out like who on an identity level, like who I was.
Yeah.
And what I was about. And then trying to make time for you and Coco. And I feel like I was probably a little bit more focused on the office than I should have been. And it was also traveling a lot back and forth to Texas. And there was just a lot where I think life felt a little bit out of balance.
Yeah.
And trying to figure it, and like financially we were doing fine, but the other stuff wasn't necessarily so much balanced out.
Right.
Do you feel like there was anything else going on at the time? That was exactly a year ago.
No, you're saying everything.
So the question is like, well, why would you have heart issues? If nothing was wrong, quote unquote, what was an emotional state? And that emotional state those emotions. And again, I'll explain this in depth on another episode of the podcast. I'm just giving the teaser now. There's so much research for me to do, and there's so much that I already know that I wish I could just blast it.
Yeah. I'm like literally squeezing because I want you to share so badly.
It will change. It will change the game for everyone.
So enlightening.
Just understanding, but there's like some embryological stuff that I'm trying to dive into to fully understand why it happens the way that, like why these emotions will get stored in the heart versus what gets stored in the neck or what gets stored in the knee. And again, we'll talk about that because there's people talk about the emotions and where they get stored, but nobody talks about why. And my question's been why. So we'll answer that on another episode of the podcast.
So powerful.
But safe to say that emotion, those emotions of imbalance, of lack of flow, probably a little bit of like lack of joy, even in the sense of with Coco, like I felt it was such a fun day with her, but it was almost a damper. I'm like, dang, we had to, like, I don't want to make mom wait. And it was like, that was the last straw because it felt like a chaotic day anyway.
Yeah.
And I think that just rush of all those things built up over time. And then that's what led to my body being like, hey, dude, we're going to totally make you stop. You're going to have to rest.
Right.
So that's the story of what happened. And you're probably wondering like, well, what does this have to do with anything? Right.
Yeah.
And the reality is that there's a direct science that explains why all this exists. So going back to what I said in the beginning, the scripture that we talked about, if you're looking to get to the next level. So this is what the science says about the heart. This is what I want to share in the beginning that I did not share. So the first thing is this. So there's a doctor, his name's J. Andrew Armour, and he did this research and he found this thing, what he calls the ICNS, which is the intrinsic cardiac nervous system. So what intrinsic cardiac nervous system means that within the heart, it has its own little mini nervous system. It has its own little mini, I don't want to say the word brain, but it kind of does. And so what he found is that it has about 40,000 neurons in it, which is quite a bit for just the heart. Like the heart's not a huge muscle,
right?
But it does a lot of work in the body. He found that this ICNS can process information. It can remember and store things in it, and that it can learn.
Your heart can learn.
Your heart can learn.
Like learn what?
It can learn about stress. It can learn about emotional states and protective states. So if you think of like, if something big happens, like what I would argue, mine is on a lower level, but for some people, like just the stress, for some reason, my heart had been like, hey, we've been here before with this lack of balance and what's happening. And so I'm going to remember it and we're just going to tighten up more.
Meaning you've experienced it again. Yeah.
At some point in the past. And so like specifically what it learns, I guess I don't know, but what we do know is that it can affect your amygdala. So the heart, well, let me say it this way. The other thing that Dr. Armour found is that 90% of those neurons in the ICNS are actually afferent, meaning that they communicate to the brain.
Oh.
So it's just like the spine in the sense we talk about Roger Sperry's research. 90% of nutrition and stimulation to the brain comes from movement of the joints of the spine. That's Roger Sperry in the 80s.
Right.
Dr. Armour found that of this intrinsic cardiac nervous system, about 90% of its neurons fire to the brain, meaning they send communication to the brain.
Is he the first one that's like found this out?
The first
one that's talking about it? Because like, who else has shared any information about this kind of?
I haven't read anyone else talk about it. There's other places like there's a Heart Math Institute, which we'll talk about their research in a second, but they're looking at slightly different things. So I think Armour is like the one who kind of is credited with finding some of this stuff.
Wow.
Yeah. So if we think about that, so everybody thinks vagus, like let me stimulate my vagus nerve my body can calm down.
That's very big right now too.
So from his research, that means from the heart to the brain, 90% of the neurology is actually sending info back to the brain. It's not from the brain to the heart. It's from the heart to the brain.
So instead of stimulating your vagus nerve, you need to be stimulating and softening.
You need to
cleaning
be
your heart.
And clearing and doing something for your heart. And we'll talk about how you do that. Because your heart communicates to the amygdala, which is the emotional part of the brain, which stores fear memories.
Okay.
So, which is critical. Like when we talk about trauma and we talk about stress and we talk about fear and worry, anxiety,
Right.
the amygdala actually grows in size and the frontal cortex shrinks in size.
Right.
Because
opposite of what we truly want.
ideal world would be that the frontal cortex is bigger and stronger and it can turn off or inhibit the amygdala.
Right.
But the heart can communicate to the amygdala and actually ramp it up. And this is how,
If you're not in the right, quote
if you're
unquote,
not in the right
space.
heart space.
Yeah.
Yep, exactly. It can also affect the prefrontal cortex.
If your heart is not pure.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And so
talk about that.
Yeah. So from a hormonal perspective, you gotta remember that the heart has a bunch of sensors in it, right? So the heart, there are sensors in the heart to sense how much pressure and what's happening and how much blood flow and how much oxygen. Like there's all these little sensors in our body, right? Which is the intrinsic part of it. It just means inside.
Mm-hmm.
So those sensors send information to the brain, so the brain knows what the heck to do. So the heart's saying, hey, here's what's happening right now. The brain will respond to the rest of the body, and maybe the brain will have an effect on the kidneys to help drop blood pressure more or increase blood pressure more. So it's this whole system working in harmony together.
Mm-hmm.
But the heart sends info to the brain, so the brain knows what is happening with the heart. And what's interesting about the heart is if we get into the next piece of this is that the heart has its own electromagnetic frequency, which according to, this is the Heart Math Institute, so this is the cool stuff, this is where it gets really fun, is that it is 60% stronger than the electromagnetic frequency of the brain. I'm sorry, I said 60%, I meant 60 times. The heart's EMF is 60% stronger.
60% or 60 times?
60 times stronger than that of the brain.
That's powerful.
Yeah, super
and nobody's
powerful.
talking about that.
No one's talking about it.
No.
So except for Dr. Armour and Heart Math Institute and
Right.
some of these people who understand this in Pearsall's book, The Heart's Code.
Yes.
So this is how like his study and The Heart's Code, the book, like those are kind of anecdotal things, but we can see why that would be true. So the heart has this huge electromagnetic frequency, which it just runs off electricity is all it does. And so what's cool about the electromagnetic frequency is that when this Heart Math Institute, what they did is they did these studies to figure out, okay, how far off the body can we measure that frequency?
Like into the fingers? Is that what you're talking about?
No, how far off the physical body.
Oh.
So without
like
me touching you.
space from
So
me to
3
you.
to 6 feet.
Uh-huh. Oh.
So that would be the height of me.
Oh.
Yeah.
So you can technically feel my electromagnetic frequency of my heart from the distance.
Which opens up a whole can of worms.
Yeah.
Why would heart issues run in the family?
Right.
If my electromagnetic frequency of my heart
Yeah.
is in training, we'll talk about in training in just a second, the electromagnetic frequency of your heart, we can pass on emotional information from person to person without even touching them, just by being in their presence.
And the heart is the only organ that this can occur with.
I won't say it's the only organ.
Yeah, but
This
it's
would
one of the more
require me to
powerful.
do more research. So
Sure.
like I would say I don't know.
Yeah.
What we know is that the heart has 60 times more electrical like a measurement of electricity than it does the brain. So there's more electrical activity in the heart than there is in the brain. Is one way to put it. And we can measure it from 3 to 6 feet away, meaning that I don't even have to touch you in order to start to affect you.
Do you feel like that's also why when you like walk into a room, you can feel somebody's like energy, if you will, or like,
Exactly.
wow.
That's why you can have someone walk by. I have it happen all the time. Like we'll have some characters that will walk by the office sometimes and I can feel, you just feel it.
Right.
And everyone's had, I don't care who that is, someone has had it where they say, I just had a bad feeling about that person.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's usually not wrong.
And that means that like they probably don't have like the purest, cleanest heart, would you say?
Yeah, they're carrying a different emotional state.
Mm.
And so the electromagnetic frequency of my heart can affect your heart and West's heart and Nadej's heart and Danielle's heart and anybody else that we're within that 3 to 6 feet with.
Right.
And my emotional state can affect theirs if I let it. So a perfect example of this, how many mornings you'll wake up, I'm already awake, doing my Bible study, doing my stuff, and I can literally feel you walk downstairs. You're laughing because you know it's true.
I know it's true. Yeah.
And in my head, I'm going, today I have to be extra patient and extra kind.
Yes.
Because if I'm not, I can pick up on it.
Right.
Some people are more attuned to this than others.
So why would I wake up that way though?
I don't know. That's not for me to figure out. That's for you and God to figure out.
But I'm saying, like, how can you wake up on one day with an unclean, pure heart, and the next day you can?
I think there are a number of things that come in. It could be what you ate. It could be the things what you thought about, what you put into your body. There are so many places that can influence it, like how you wake up.
Sure.
But I think more of the point is just to understand that you can feel someone else's, when people talk about, like they had such a good energy or such a good vibe or whatever.
That's really their
No,
heart
what you're
posture.
talking about is heart space.
Wow.
And if we go back again, like just to circle this back to scripture. So man looks at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. Above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it.
Mm.
So if I'm not careful, I can let your heart's energy, emotional state that it's carrying, that's affecting your brain,
Right.
or anyone else's brain, I can let that affect me because I'll feel it.
Which is why there are days when I may be in that state, and Coco and I just butt heads the entire day because she's taking on that exact same heart space.
So it's not to blame, but I think there's a very real connection between the space that we create and the heart posture that we have, and how other people interact with us. That's why you can be around. I mean, we take care of a lot of clients, and there are a few people who, I told somebody this yesterday. I was like, I just love being around you because she has a clean heart.
I think it's cool too. I was thinking, like, there are people the first several visits where it's not necessarily like the most enjoyable to be around them when they're in the office, but like you can see their heart like opening up as visits go on, and like it's just more energetic to like be around them. Does that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can watch someone's color change. Danielle said this last week. She said, have you noticed that they just look totally different? And even came in with a new hairdo. And it's not a coincidence. Why? Because we created a space here. And you mentioned this, I think last week or 2 weeks ago on the episode. Somebody came in and she said, just so glad to be home.
Right.
And she was talking about the office.
Yeah.
You talked about this on social media too. Part of that is because we're creating a space with how our hearts operate. And we get our brains and our hearts into alignment. And when we do so, people can feel it.
Yeah.
And people can also feel the other.
So it can essentially, like, the space that's being created in here can also break those generations.
It can help start to, for
Yeah.
sure. I don't think we could just create a space and be like, oh, there's such good vibes in here and like the music's good and people are just going to magically heal.
No, I get that.
I think on some level, yeah. But one of my favorite things, I have a mentor who said this, and he said, people should be getting better on the way to your office. So if you're a practitioner and you're watching this, I think it's important to know where your heart space is.
Yeah.
And how often we hear people say, I'm just so excited to get back in the office. I'm so glad that my appointment was today because I've just been feeling it. And if you're not creating that space, then you're not facilitating healing,
Like
because you have to have both.
Like if you're creating that space of just like every person's a number, get them in and out the door. I know you hate that phrase, but like, you know, like I need more new people. You're not really creating the space for them to be healing on the way there.
Yeah, exactly. So what's your identity rooted in?
Right.
Is it rooted in your numbers, or is it rooted in your bank account, or is it rooted in what clothes you wear, or is it rooted in actually serving people? So like, where's your heart coming from?
Yeah. Well, like Jesus talks about the two most important commandments is loving God and then loving other people as yourself.
Keyword loving.
Yeah. So the heart.
So the
Having
emotion
that pure
of
heart.
love
Yeah.
and the emotion of fear or resentment or shame or guilt, or we could go down the list, those emotions are going to affect literally the outward environment in which you are in with other people. And so then if you wonder, well, I don't know where my kid gets it from, or it just runs in the family.
You.
A perfect example of this, I'm working on this, like going through it heavy.
Yeah.
And this is probably a little bit, I don't know if it's too much to share, but I was raised to think that we're better than everyone. And not because we had money in my family. Yeah. So like my dad's side of the family, there was a lot of stuff, a lot of trauma, a lot of darkness. And so my dad, in his best attempt to keep me safe and away from like all the things that were happening, because he didn't want me to turn out that way. So doing, I would argue almost like, I don't want to say noble is the right word, but he was doing something great to protect me. But it also rooted in me a mentality, a heart posture of I'm better. My way's better. I know more than you. I'm smarter than you. If you don't do the things that I do, then you're stupid and you're dumb and you're not as worthy.
Yeah.
And that doesn't serve people well. It doesn't serve my family well.
True.
It doesn't serve my daughter to raise her that way.
Right.
And so there's had to be a breaking off of a lot of this stuff that was my identity, because I thought it was the right thing to do. Because I was raised to be, we don't see them. We don't talk to them.
They're not able to contribute value into your life. Yeah.
But then that was my mentality. We don't talk to them. We don't talk about that. We don't do that. We don't eat like that, in a better, arrogant, prideful kind of way.
Yeah.
But that's just a mental stronghold. But that came because of the heart posture that my dad raised me in all the time.
But he didn't really know better at the time.
No, he had no idea.
He was doing the right thing by keeping you away.
Yep. But this is when we go back and people talk about like, well, it just runs in the family. No, it doesn't. It runs in the mentality. It runs in the heart space that your parents carried and passed on to you, and you're not even aware of. And this is how we're healing people. This is how people heal. And I've said it before and I'll say it again. Jesus didn't come here to solve people's problems. We're not in the office, in the existence here to solve your back pain.
Right.
Or yes, we can help with that stuff. But what Jesus came here for is to heal people. And you see him do it time and time again in the Gospels.
Yes.
And he encourages his disciples to do the same by laying hands and praying on people. That's a heart space. And so when you create the heart space on the chiropractic side, what we do, that's when you get life-changing. But you can't, in my opinion, based on this research, I don't think you can have one without the other. So the heart issues didn't run in the family. The bitterness and the lack of balance and the lack of joy ran in the family. The cancer didn't run in the family. The resentment and anger and the rage ran in the family.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so why does this matter?
Yeah, so there are a couple reasons it matters. And if we really want to get to the heart of it, see what I did there? This is how we tie it all together. So there's a level of what I would call human synchronization. So you have to get in sync with another person, right?
Does that mean like love in sync?
It could be love, but
Like
it could, I mean, yeah, all right. The question would be this, is how much do you care? Realistically, how much do you care about the people that you're serving? Because I know a lot of people have practices where half of the people that they see, they just feel like they're a headache.
Oh, yes. They dread that person coming into the office.
Yeah. And so I also want to take it out, because if there are people who are listening who just care about the brain and they want to know more about the heart and that kind of stuff, then I think there's a real application here too. If you're going into the office every day, or say you own a business, or you're an employee, like showing up in a way to get in sync with other people, it doesn't mean romantically love. But yeah, on some level, Like, we have to have a posture where I just genuinely like appreciate the people that I'm surrounded by, even if we completely disagree with them.
Mm-hmm.
So a good example of this for me as a practitioner, I know there are people out there who practice, and I'm not saying it's good, bad, right, or wrong, but they're like, if you do certain things with your kiddos, I can't say that word because this will totally get banned if I do it. If you do certain things with your kiddos, then you're stupid and you're a bad parent and you're just dumb and all the negative stuff. But I'm like, that doesn't create a bridge for someone to trust you.
No.
There should be like, I appreciate that you think that you're making the right decisions for your child.
Right.
And I'm going to do something different. I don't have to agree with you. We don't have to agree.
Right.
You don't have to see my way.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, a lot of times people walk around from day to day to day, and I have friends who do this where I'm worried about this. I hope this doesn't happen. I don't want this to happen. That's a heart posture of fear.
Yes.
You can hear it in someone's language.
Right.
Because remember, the heart is going to influence what flows out of the body. What do we say in the beginning? If we go back to Proverbs 4:23, above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. If everything you do flows from it, that includes the words that you say.
Yes.
So you could immediately identify when someone is from a heart posture of fear, negativity, scare, lack, whatever it is, that's the negative emotion that's going to trigger a stress response. And this is why the gurus would say, like, you got to look who your inner circle is. And like, a lot of people are going to try to pull you down. It's like, they're kind of right, because your heart is going to entrain to the people around you, which means it's just going to sync up to the people around you. So the human synchronization piece of it, understanding that who you are surrounded by is what you're going to sync up with.
Which is why, like, parents can pass on things.
Which is why parents
to
pass,
their kids.
do pass on things. Yeah. Like, undoubtedly pass on things. And I can see it, especially because we take care of lots of generations of families.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, grandma had this tendency. Daughter had this tendency. Grandkid has this tendency.
So would you say that then that heart space and heart posture are more important than the epigenetic genetic piece of it, or that creates that epigenetic and genetic piece?
I think the heart space creates the epigenetic space. And if you would have asked me a year ago, do you think you're better than people? I would have said no. I don't have any pride. I don't have any arrogance. I don't have any ego. Like, I genuinely love everybody that we take care of.
Right.
But I had a realization a couple days ago that, like, God literally said to me, is like, that is not true. In some ways, he said, you think you're better than me.
So that was like, you weren't conscious of that though.
No, but I am now. And I can see where I've started in subtle ways to instill things in Coco to believe that she's better than other people.
So, like, how can you get to that conscious space of that though?
You first have to recognize it. So a lot of times it's just being aware that, like, if you are struggling with certain things, symptoms, there's a deeper cause to them, and you have to understand the emotional connection. I cannot wait to do that episode. It's coming.
Oh, I feel like it's going to be like 3 episodes.
It probably will be. It's so much.
Just go and
it's
go
so
and
much.
go.
It's too intense.
It is.
And it's like, it's hard. And this is where it hurts, because people are like, I don't want to hear that. Because it literally is going to start to tear down the identity that someone has.
Yeah.
Because built on a bunch of stuff that's not truly who we are and who we were made to be. So that's number one, is just a human synchronization. When I say that, really what I mean is like the circle that you're surrounded by, how you impact other people, the emotions that you carry, the words that you speak, those kind of things. Number two is understanding that we actually shape atmospheres. All of us do. It doesn't matter if you're a parent, it doesn't matter if you're a business owner, it doesn't matter if you're a practitioner, healer, chiropractor, or energy worker, or PT, or whatever it is. You have the ability to shape an atmosphere. And if you know that, which I'm sharing it with you now, I'm activating it within you, you have a responsibility in your home and in your marriage and relationship with your kids, and when you go to the grocery store, and when you interact at the gas station, and when you go to church, and all the places that you go, to carry yourself in a heart space that I would argue is, like, I don't want to say correct, but that flows life and like life more abundantly.
the love and pure and clean.
And this is not easy because it takes work and it takes a shifting in identity. But this is the secret sauce of, I think, what makes people ultra successful, because then they know who they are and there's no competition. I'm gonna do another episode. I'm doing the research on it right now for like why comparison triggers a stress response in the body. Because I hear a lot of people who say like, well, you need like a group of people to be around that you compare yourself to. And I'm gonna completely crush that, because again, it goes back to the heart. So we shape atmospheres, right? One of my best friends in the entire world who does discipleship, he talks about this all the time. He's like, we shape atmospheres, and he empowers guys to just think that way. And which is why someone can walk into our office and say, I just feel at home. Or like, it's so crazy when I step in here, it's like the world outside doesn't exist, because we've created an atmosphere.
Yeah.
Because we set our intention in our heart every single day when we step into this place. Me, right. Wes, Nadej, Danielle, you, the clients that we have come in here. This is why nobody talks about politics. We don't complain about the weather. We don't complain about anything. It's all uplifting.
Yes.
It's intentional because it creates a different heart space. And then lastly, just remember that heart determines your decision making. If you have an improper heart space, you will for sure make lesser decisions. And this is what the research says. Dr. Armour's research, the HeartMath Institute, is that our decision-making decreases when we have a heart of fear, when we have a heart of stone, when we have a heart of resentment, when we have a heart of lack of understanding or lack of love or whatever.
Right. That's good.
What are you thinking?
Can you give an example for that last one?
Yeah. So, okay. Let's just say, for instance, I'm one of those people who says my language is going to tell you about my heart. And I say, I'm worried. I'm worried that this is going to happen, or I don't want this to happen. And I always I'm saying, I don't want. So for me, if I'm making decisions from a place of what I don't want, I'm always going to be reactive. It's going to create chaos, both within my body and probably in my life too, because I'm not planning. So planning is a result of the frontal cortex of the brain. If we can't plan, then we're going to be reactive. If we're going to be reactive, then we're going to make poor decisions, because we're not making decisions for a day or eternity. We're making them for the next hour. And I mean, really simply is like this, like, I'm super hungry, so I'm just going to stop at and get fast food.
Right.
Wherever you sit on fast food, this is probably offend people that I'm talking about
That's a reactive decision, though, is what you're saying.
It's reactive versus thinking about, okay, if I eat fast food right now, it's going to make me feel like crap later. Right. I'm going to be more tired. I'm going to want to go to bed. Maybe I'll sleep like crap as well. And then I'm going to wake up in the morning and I'm going to be more hungry, and it's going to trigger this whole cascade of events that will happen tomorrow that are going to make me worse off, instead of being able to make a decision that goes a little bit longer term. Well, if I eat that, I'm going to feel like crap, so I'm not going to eat that. Instead, I'm going to do this, and then we just roll into...
Which creates the harmony in the system versus the homeostasis in the system.
Exactly. So homeostasis, alive,
living.
Harmony, thriving, optimization. If you're a leader, you don't have to force leadership. You just need to work on your heart posture. Straight up, plain and simple.
And everybody's a leader, because you talked about that in our leadership episode. Like, everybody's leading.
You're leading somebody. It just depends. If somebody's watching, it might be your kid. It might be somebody you don't even know, but somebody's watching you and probably making decisions based on what you do.
Yes.
And the reason you don't need to force leadership is because people can feel it, which is why somebody said yesterday, they're like, your team has grown because they haven't been in a while. And I'm like, yeah, it's insane. It doesn't even make sense, actually, that we have a team this big. But why? Because I care about people more than I care about how much money's in my bank account.
Right.
I'm not saying that doesn't matter. But if I care about people more and they start to reach their goals, then it just seems to happen that the other things show up too.
It's a pure intention and heart space.
Yep, exactly. And then, lastly, I think the last thing to just remember is starting to leverage relationships in a positive way. instead of being transactional, just remember that you get to set the atmosphere.
So being of like service mindset versus a taker.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which is exactly
Always.
what Jesus said.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Which is what I struggled with in the past.
Mm-hmm.
So to wrap it all up, if you're looking to get to the next level, if you're looking to grow your business, if you're looking to see more people, if you're looking to be a better parent, if you're looking to be better in sports or athletics, your heart posture matters. 90% of your heart's neurology sends information to your brain. So your heart influences your brain. So getting the heart posture right, understanding the scriptural, there's very specific scripture that talks about what flows in your body and out of your mouth flows from the heart. Mm. And you can tell the position of somebody's heart by the way that they think, by the decisions that they make, because all of it influences neurology. And we should be focusing on coherence, not just homeostasis.
Mm-hmm. So good.
Any last thoughts?
No.
All right, fam. That's it. We'll talk to you guys next week. Peace.